Okay, so I just warned the participants we're going to have a punchy session today. We're going to keep each other on our toes even though we're in a seat. So that said, what I would love to do to start is a quick 60-second round-robin burst. Who are you? What brings you to the stage?
Mark and Richard bring me to the stage. Thank you, Mark and Richard. Who am I? I'm currently living my second life. My previous life was in corporate, climbing the ladder, as so many of us do. And my title was always marketing. Mm-hmm. And for almost 20 years, I was told that I was doing marketing wrong. And one of my first clients, when I became a consultant, an independent consultant, said to me, I'm looking at your CV, and I see a lot of marketing titles, but you've done finance, you've done HR, you've done ops, And so the truth is, I'd been involved in a lot of restructures. The entities I worked with were multinationals based in the UK. And so I'd done a lot of employee experience and customer experience. And that's my second life now, is leadership, specifically coaching and consulting for customer and employee experiences.
I'm excited to hear that cross-functional aspect of your career come into play. Craig, over to you.
Well, thank you, and great to see some familiar faces and new people. Welcome to Dubai. I asked myself the same question, who am I, 2 years ago when I decided to take a year out for the first time. And I realized I could only talk about myself in terms of what I'd done. And that's a very scary thought. And I'd lost myself in the corporate world, in the consulting world. And it's really important to, recheck in with yourself who you are. So I appear not today, not as anybody, other than say I'm around these days to advise and assist the C-suite primarily in how to make better decisions in CX. They're super scared. They don't know what to choose. There's so much being thrown at them. They know customers are important. They know employees are important, but they have no idea how to lead it. So that's the place that I'm playing at the moment, is just showing up to help leaders lead more effectively in the CX space.
Brilliant. We're going to hear more from your perspective in a bit. But Aslan, last but not least.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll try to make it short. Basically, I started my career in advertising, intelligence, and research. And that part was when most of my time was devoted to the brand. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Eventually, I switched on to the customer side back in 2017. Since 2018, I'm running Renaissance Consulting as a CX and management consulting firm. We've been focusing on primarily the Middle Eastern market, worked across some African countries, Middle East. Hopefully, we'll be able to expand and bring more of what we're doing across the globe.
Excellent. Well, without further ado, let's dive in. So as we think about CX leadership in the course of this conversation, we're going to think about it as a progression. We'll start by talking about what it means to lead oneself as a CX leader. How can we develop our capabilities and competencies to excel and lead other teams within the organization? And that's the second part. We're going to talk about what it means to lead a CX team, be the change makers for customer centricity within a broader company, the government, et cetera. And that brings us to the third component, which is, what does it mean to lead CX in a customer-centric organization? How can our enterprises think from a CX leadership point of view? But going back to the start, going back to leading oneself and being a CX leader, let me ask you, and we'll go person by person down the row, what are the one or two skills that you think are most imperative, helpful, valuable for a CX leader to possess and demonstrate in their work? Not a small question.
No, I was just going to say, thank you. That's a big question. It's a big question, and Natalia, you spoke about empathy, and that's one of the first things that I've seen is lacking in the people that I work with. Not empathy for others, empathy for themselves. Understanding who we are as people, understanding our emotions, our values, because our values drive our behaviors. This is something, when you were talking up here, it was like listening to myself. So there's I took notes, lots of resonance. That is the number one thing, empathy for yourself. Know who you are, know what's important to you, because if you are going into work fighting against yourself every single day, you are not going to deliver a good experience for the people who are working with you or the customers who you would like to get to buy your product. So That's my
All right.
first dive in.
So we've got empathy. Craig, I'm going to come back to you in a second, but I want to jump over to Aslan. From your perspective, especially in behavioral engineering, behavioral economics, why do you think there might be an empathy gap, whether it be in terms of leadership or in terms of understanding customers? What are you seeing?
Well, I think that there are two things, actually.
Yeah.
The first one that you brought up is the EQ. I think a lot of people think that EQ cannot be trained, but I don't think so. I do believe that we can teach people how to be more empathetic. There are specific tools. There are lots of different books, like Chris Voss, for example, on the communications is brilliant. And the second bit is the actual behavioral economics. There is so much under the hood that we don't see about the customers, about people. To your point, Natalia, earlier about the 40% of people who are satisfied not coming back to do business with the same company, it's actually very simple. In most of the cases, even satisfied customers, if the choice architecture is not done right, what happens is that with the choice complexity, for example, is one of the biases, and there are hundreds of them, what happens is that we either default to a pre-selected sort of item or something that we've used to do before, or we drop out. In most of the cases, those customers won't be able to explain to you why they won't come back, even if you ask them. I mean, I've done research across many geographies, whether it's Sendai in Japan or UK, pretty much all of it, Europe, United States, and every time you're limited with the questions that you can ask to the customer. And then there are things that you don't know that you don't know. There are things that you cannot ask, right? But even if you could ask, the customer wouldn't be able to articulate why exactly he doesn't want to come back. And working with those soft things, with the behavioral part, I think is pretty important. And understanding behavioral economics is important to any CX leader, in my opinion.
So building, well, you've got the mic. Building on empathy so far is one of the key qualities. Aslan, is there any other quality that comes top of mind to you for a strong CX leader?
Not so of the, I mean, I can elaborate a lot on the technical and the soft skills. However, in my opinion, the leader has to understand why he or she is in it.
Right.
Right? In most of the cases, like, I clearly understand the reason why I switched to CX, because I wanted to help the customer. You know, that was a differentiation for me when you work for example, for a tobacco industry, and you know that there is a lot of research that comes out, and they keep telling people about how much more focused people are because they're smoking cigarettes, which makes sense because they're being calmed down, and being calmed, less agitated, let's say, less aroused means also being more focused. But that's not necessarily, I mean, that's what I mean. So you switch eventually from the brand, from the dark side, to the bright side. And most of the customers, they have to understand why they're, most leaders have to understand why they're doing it.
Right.
Why are you in it? Is it you just playing a role, or there is a cause?
So we've got empathy, we've got purposefulness. Craig, what would you add, the most important qualities for a CX leader?
I'd say there are three that probably haven't been mentioned. One is, and Laura touched on it, but it's almost a radical self-awareness. We all have blind spots. We all have biases. The fact we have a brain, we have a bias. And we need to be really cognizant of our own lens and how we're looking at things. So I think really, to Laura's point, look internally. The second one, I think the skill that one needs to be able to do is be a translator of stories. Take data, take stories, take things that embarrass the organization. And I want to be a little radical in the sense that we're far too polite, I think, as CX practitioners trying to build consensus, when actually consensus is not what we want to build. You want to create disruption and see who's going to join up. Maybe it's only 3 departments, maybe it's only 2 departments, to get those first initiatives starting to roll. So we're far too polite, I think, as practitioners. So I think storytelling, being able to take actual, tangible customer stories, add data to them, explain what it costs the business or what it costs your brand reputation because of those things happening every time. And then the final thing is, I think, again, coming back to the internal perspective, is what is your own emotional resilience? We know how much effort it takes to get things shifted. And other than forums like this, we've got no top-up. Who do we turn to when our bucket's empty? So having emotional resilience, because you've always got to push and very often influence without any positional authority. And I think it's really important for me is CX is a competence, it's not a function. Mm-hmm. And very often when we have CX departments, CX stops because CX deals with it. So how do we turn CX from being a function in an organization to being a competence in the organization? And that means, as a CX practitioner, you can't really have positional power. You've got to have influencing power. So those would be a few things that I would say.
So we've got empathy, purposefulness, intentionality and connectedness, resilience. Along those lines, though, it reminds me, Craig, of what Olga was describing in her remarks in the panel earlier about how a key component of CX leadership in an organization, whether it's titled or not, is being connected to the broader system of the company, finance, marketing, sales, operations, et cetera. So kind of transitioning then into leading a CX team, how do we do that? How do we build connections? What techniques or tools have you seen, practiced, observed? Laura, what do you think helps bridge that culture?
I'm going to answer this from the two angles, the corporate angle that I lived and I saw, and then now the more consulting angle that I'm living. The corporate angle is very clear. Most organizations should not have a CX team. Because when they have one CX team, then everybody thinks CX is that team's responsibility, that team's problem, that team's KPIs, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. The truth is, the reason that my CV had so many things in it is because in order to improve the customer experience, which just came naturally to me, even though my title was marketing, but in order to make those improvements, I had to improve things with finance, with operations, with IT. It's about how long did you keep an international client waiting on the phone before you answered them? Did you give them the right information? There's one organization I worked with where someone, customer service in the UK, answered the phone, someone calling from India, gave them completely the wrong answer, which resulted in the company being sued and having to shut down in India. Oof. But that's not the customer service person's fault.
Right.
They were given a manual and told what the answers were. So that's the one side. The second side, answering it now as a consultant, is actually I'm seeing more and more that entities are moving away from having just one CX team, and they're understanding that there needs to be a cross-functional and also a cross-hierarchical component to CX. So yes, they might have what they call a team, but they encourage the team to work with everyone. And when I look at those teams, they function a lot better. They are a lot more empowered. They have different perspectives, so they have a broader understanding. And so when it comes to leading CX teams in this day and age, understanding that your colleagues understand that CX is for everyone. Right. That's very, very important. You cannot come with that siloed mentality, that siloed mindset. It doesn't work.
Yeah. Craig, what are your thoughts on this?
I think if we go back to, you mentioned Deming this morning. I love Deming because he says there are only two roles in any company. You're either serving the customer or you're serving the people who are serving the customer.
Right.
And we sometimes forget that organizations are structured to best serve the customer, not best serve the C-suite or best serve the marketing department or something else. So the holistic view of, I think as a practitioner, I led the CX function at Emirates Airlines for a number of years without any positional power and a team of 3, deliberately. So we didn't have a CX department. We would work and join the dots between parts of the business that needed to work together. And our success was based on, could the dots be joined? Not on how big the budget was or anything else. So I had a discretionary budget. So, we always get back to cost centers, which I think are the biggest disaster in companies because that stops any form of collaboration. But you'd say, so I need you and you and you to work together, or we don't have budget this year. Okay, how much do you have? How much do you have? How much do you have? I'll supplement the rest.
Right.
And so having that ability to help join the dots, I think, is a really important function. And then I think as a consultant, I started to feel like a real fraud in front of customers, in front of clients, because you think, actually, this stuff is common sense. Why are you employing us to help you? And common sense isn't common enough. So you've all got jobs for life from that perspective. So I think we shouldn't underestimate that parts of the business find it really difficult to talk to each other. And our role is to be the interpreter. We need to speak finance. We need to speak marketing. We need to speak sales. We need to speak customer. And so finding a language that we can all speak is really important. And one of the examples, if there's time to mention it, is using brand as the speak. Because we always think brand is a marketing thing. It's the logo, it's the whatever else. But if you distill everything down to every interaction either makes your brand or breaks your brand at that given moment. Whether it's the internal accounting department being late to get something to marketing, it breaks our brand. It costs somebody something. And when you put it down to that, we are all accountable for building the brand. And anything that breaks our reputation, personal, departmental, or company, actually affects the end product. So find a language that you can all speak, help join the dots, help supplement people being able to play with each other, I think are really important.
Aslan, along the lines of connecting the dots between teams cross-functionally, what are some techniques or tools you've seen organizations use in the past to approach this culture building?
In most of the companies I've been working for or with, the most successful ones were the ones where they did have a wider mandate. If we're speaking about CX specifically, just paraphrasing what Lara said, there is one way to look at it, and I agree with that CX is a mandate for everybody, but in reality today, what we have is CX is compartmentalized. Right. So to basically let these CX leaders to see a bigger picture, they also should have a bigger mandate. With a bigger mandate comes the question, what do I need to learn? What other new things do I need to know about? And eventually, things will naturally evolve. When it comes to connecting teams, these same leaders, in my opinion, they need a much better skill in storytelling. Yep. Motivational skills, ability to unite people under one banner, basically, and make sure that they do follow these people. I haven't seen, to be honest, in my life, in my career, last like 20 years, I haven't seen too many exceptionally motivational speakers when it comes to the whether it's a town hall meeting, for instance, or a small departmental catch-up. But those people who have that kind of influence, they do manage to lead and with fire. Basically, it's been always a success, whatever they've been doing, because whatever you're doing, if everybody is aligned, something is going to eventually work out, even if you don't have any strategy or tactic.
You knew my next question. So one of the responsibilities of a CX department or an organization in general, frankly, is developing a strategy and a strategy towards our customer experience. Admittedly, that is a really ambiguous word. Who here uses the word strategy every day? I feel like a lot of us do. And yet, there are 1,000,001 books on it. There are dozens, hundreds of courses taught by universities around the world. But it's still an amorphous blob of a concept. What is a CX strategy? And how might a CX leader approach it when the CEO inevitably asks, what are we doing? Or what should we be doing? What do you think? Go for it.
All right, so...
softball.
Yeah, I hope no one is going to be waiting behind the doors when I'm going to be walking out of this session today. Basically,
we've got targets on all of our backs.
Basically, the problem that we have, guys, is when it comes to customer journeys or strategies or whatever we call it in the meeting, or however we set expectations with, okay, you have to deliver a strategy, A or strategy B. This is just a piece of paper, a digital deck, with a recollection of your vision and how you should go about it. I'm not speaking about, out of 40, 50 pitches we've participated this year, probably 20 were called custom experience strategy, and 10, 12 of them were about journey mapping. So no, this is not a strategy, clearly. The problem of this is we pay too much attention to what it means as a word, like okay, strategy. What is it? It can be different for everybody. What really matters is, do you have a real vision in that strategy? And then how you follow up on that vision would strongly depend on the resources you have, the structure you have, and the plan that you want to follow. And then there is an aim for that strategy, right? Like, what do you actually want to achieve with that? Will it work or not?
Craig, I see your gears spinning. What do you think?
I'm spinning. The hamster's running for the first time in a long time. Strategy is not a document.
Yeah.
And most businesses are very, and especially the C-suite, totally inarticulate when it comes to what they want from customer. You start off in a consulting practice, you say, what's your CX strategy? And the CEO goes blank, and the head of marketing goes blank. We need customers. So for me, the CX strategy is really around patterns of things we do to help our customers see, feel, or think in a certain way. And we're not good at that because we're looking for the rational, not the emotional. So the CX strategy is all about how do we connect emotionally, how do we make customers feel something. And a lot of the work we've been doing with C-suite is getting them to define their, what I call emotional intentions. What are the 3 things you want your customers to feel? And they can't talk. They don't have the vocab to spell those things out until you take them through a process. But once they get it, you can start to then apply that as design thinking to everything else. So the only other comment I'd make about strategy, and it came from Frances Fry, who is somebody you would probably know, and she says the key thing with strategy is being just as clear about what you're not going to do as what you are going to do. So that you're not constantly morphing things, you're sticking to, we're going to go this route until it's no longer the route we want to go down. But we're not going to take on that and that and that. We're definitely not going to do that. So for me, strategy is definitely not a document. It's definitely defining how we want people to feel, because our employees need to feel the same things if they are to try and help our customers feel those things. And if we can't articulate that, we don't have a strategy.
And Laura, before I come to you with the same question, I want to interject something, Craig, you've made me realize. So many companies have missions and visions and values, but how often are those really focused inward, especially from a values standpoint? We talk about how we treat each other as coworkers, we talk about quality and ethics, but how many companies have a set of values from an emotive standpoint about the way in which we want our customers to feel? Something to consider as a takeaway as part of that strategic work is figuring out what are we actually here to deliver, and how should we approach delivering that from the outside back in? But back to the concept of strategy. Laura, over to you.
I'm so pleased I'm the last one to answer this question because it's given me a couple of moments to decide that I am going to answer it the way I want to. I'm going to start by saying that we all have to accept something, we all have to understand something, and we all have to behave knowing that business is broken. Businesses cannot continue to run or be run the way they were in the 1980s and into the 1990s. The capitalist, consumer, greed is good, corporate culture, that doesn't work anymore. And I'm not saying that doesn't work anymore because the balance sheets or the P&Ls or the numbers are saying it doesn't work. The numbers say it still works. Society is saying it doesn't. When I mentor, one of the things I do is I do mentor young people. When I mentor university students or even early career professionals, We're talking about them finding a role in an organization that is aligned with their values.
Right.
They are very clear about this. They're very intentional about this. This was not the case in the 80s. The 80s was all about, the guys on Wall Street with the big bucks. And
Yeah.
That's not what is moving the world anymore. Business is broken, and these entities will die. And the reason they will die is because they think of CX as a separate strategy. I brought a prop with me that I wanted to share with you. This is the Non-Executive Directors Handbook, UK Non-Exec Directors Association. I'm reading it in preparation for a talk that I'm giving early next year to the members of the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales. So I'm familiarizing myself with what's really important to them. And all of these, I'm about halfway through, and all of these little pink slips are the number of times customer experience has been mentioned in the Non-Exec Directors Handbook. Customer experience is not, it's not a customer experience strategy, it is a business strategy.
Right.
It is business growth, it is business sustainability. The reason that business is broken is because the CEOs and the shareholders are still thinking about quarterly earnings. Well, if you're focusing on quarterly earnings, how dare you tell your people that you want them to work in a way that will make sure that you are, as a company, around for the next 10, 20, 50 years. That doesn't work. And not only does it not work because it's the wrong mindset, you are rewarding the people who are not thinking that way, who are only thinking about quarterly earnings. They're the ones getting the hundreds of millions of dollars as bonuses.
Right.
And the rest of the people are getting made redundant. Business is broken.
Yeah. There's certainly irony in the reality that we often forget, ourselves included, but especially I think economics in general, that earnings come from somewhere, and that somewhere ought to be outside of the organization. Otherwise, we're just recycling our own cash. So to your point, I'll echo, customer centricity ought to be part of that overarching strategy. Otherwise, you don't have a strategy, I suppose. Craig, I see you itching.
I just wanted to make a comment. Seeing all these pink slips is super, super encouraging. I sit a lot in board meetings to try and advise the C-suite. And very often you walk out of a board meeting or out of a management meeting and you say, I didn't hear the word customer once.
Yeah.
And yet this is a core strategy of yours. So this is, it's very interesting, I think, to see that and know that we all know it's not practiced. The results of bad behavior, as Laura was indicating, a client in the UAE, significant telco provider, so there's a choice of many, called me into a meeting in Abu Dhabi, so even less of a choice of knowing who it is, to say our NPS score is too high, how do we reduce it? And looking through the details, we found out that, of course, the C-suite had been totally incentivized on the NPS score, so it could only go up. And that's the nonsense we start to get in measurement when we are using the wrong measures for the wrong KPIs and rewarding what should be an insight, not a reward structure. So I think this whole idea of strategy driving coherence, in other words, we're all going roughly in the same direction, but not necessarily driving convergence, is a really important thing. We don't all have to be the same. We don't all have to come together, but we all need to be going in the same direction.
So as we pivot from the why to the how of doing this, and mindful of the responsibility that we have as customer-centric professionals, what are some ways, like tactical and practical ways, that we can make CX, customer centricity, customer success, customer service, whatever we'd like to call it, how can we make that viral within an organization without becoming an unintentional virus, if you'll pardon the play on words? Aslan, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I think we might have met the same person in two different cities, because I had a conversation with another company last week about their NPS being top 10 in the world. They obviously understand that it's not top 10, and they want to have an audit going through the organization. So going back to the strategy and how to make it a part of your daily routine, I guess, I do believe that strategy is a thing. The reason why I call it a document or a source of sort of information that brings few pieces together is very simple, because in most of the cases, when you call something a strategy and try to enforce a strategy that is supposed to enforce a culture, things don't work out.
Right.
Because strategy cannot really impact your culture. Your culture can impact your strategy. And in this situation, I would say that bringing up a culture and making sure that you do actually work on the rituals Natalia was talking about, making sure that there is a certain specific routine within the company. However funny that routine might seem, it would work much better than so-said strategy.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. A more targeted kind of a rifle shot approach versus a shotgun blast.
Or you can use a whip. That's
That too.
always a solution.
Told you, we're going to have targets on our backs. What do you think? What are some tactical, practical ways in which we can kind of manifest this customer centricity?
I think to be a little radical, to not be afraid to rock the boat, because you get followers who believe the same thing but are waiting for the signals that it's okay to call BS when it is BS.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's quite important to have the guts to be able to say, that's not right. It doesn't feel right, regardless of what's being said somewhere else. So this is, I suppose the best way to answer this is the culture doesn't come from focusing on the customer experience. The culture comes from the leadership driving the employee experience, which drives the customer experience, and then feedback from both the employee and customer experience reinforming the strategy of the company. And it's really important, I think, that those three things are seen together. And a way of illustrating culture might be, I think, in the measurement of return on experience, which looks at what's the total return on your leadership experience, your employee experience, and your customer experience, and does this enhance the company? Which would then stop the finance department asking you, what's the ROI on CX?
Right.
Because when you ask the finance department the same question, they can't answer it. If you say to the finance department, what's the ROI on the finance department, they can't answer that. But they're very comfortable to ask you that. So don't be afraid to rock the boat. Don't be afraid to challenge what is commonly held belief and change the conversation, because that drives the culture and helps align people to say it's okay to change. And I don't mind being first and get a few more followers, and
Right.
you've got start to have a movement happening.
Before I answer, I'm going to take us back a few years to before COVID. And before COVID, now Craig has been doing this a lot longer than I have. Well before COVID. I call it BC too. So I left corporate 2018, and I started There Is No Spoon, totally taken from The Matrix, yes. Craig was doing CX longer and earlier than I was. However, even in 2018, when I would say CX to people out here, they would correct me and they say, you mean UX? Yes, go on. I would say customer experience because I thought, okay, the letters are confusing. So I say customer experience. You mean customer service? Yes? No. One person actually said to me, I don't need a branding agency, and I'm not entirely sure where they got that in my proposal. However, after COVID, something happened. And CX in this region didn't just close the gap with Europe and the US, Canada, those places that we usually look to for innovation. They've overtaken.
Yeah.
What has happened, and this is the reason I say this is because this is the practical application that we're after. What has happened is that during COVID, companies here noticed, local companies, not the multinationals, noticed that everybody was suffering. They noticed that they couldn't compete on price. Nobody cared about price. Everybody was craving connection, human connection. Well, how do you do that? How do we stay in touch with our customers when we're not seeing them? When they're not coming to our restaurant, when they're not walking into our hotel? What do we do? And so what then happened is there started to be, slowly but surely, this understanding that what the customer's experience is important and everybody must play a role in it. And so now what's happening is CX, more and more often, you can do one of two things. Depending on your CX maturity, it's either there's at least one KPI for every person in every department that is in some way related to CX, whether that's finance or marketing or data science, whoever it is. A second thing is, and this is going to the point that you made, Craig, you take these little pockets of cross-functional, cross-hierarchical staff, and this is what I do when I get asked by other entities to train on their behalf for CX. They'll usually say, so we're going to give you the marketing team or the customer service team. And I go back and I say, no, I will only train if you give me at least one person from every single department. And we will sit there and everyone will learn about customer journey mapping, and everyone will learn about customer experience, and everyone will learn the part that they play in it. So when they go back to the company, they can talk to each other and it starts spreading slowly but surely.
Along those lines, I'll give you 3 tactical approaches I've used in consulting to approach that. One, take your customer journey map, but explode it with a service blueprint. Figure out, to your point earlier, Craig, what is the experience that you'd like your customers to go through, but then also what is the experience to make that happen internally? Unveil the business processes both on the front line and further towards what we in hospitality would call kind of the heart of the house. Another practice that we commonly recommend is doing, we simply call it the yarn exercise, but basically whether you're in a room with 10 people, 20 people, 100 people in an organization, have a progressively larger ball of yarn, but pass it from one person to another. Ask somebody who holds it. Find somebody else in the room that you work with that you depend on to get your job done. I always start with somebody on the front line who has direct contact with the customer, the patient, the guest, whomever their end customer is, and we follow that yarn around the room and show visibly not only how everybody's connected, but how everybody is connected to that foundational role of customer centricity, the revenue generation that in turn produces the earnings. Third thing that happens typically after that session is we will then recommend that if they haven't yet done so, they reverse shadow each other. So whomever you've connected with, even if you work together on a daily basis, spend at least one day, 8-hour shift with them. Watch what they do, learn how they do what they do. It builds empathy, it builds a sense of trust and camaraderie, but also it exposes us to the sheer complexity of our businesses, sometimes more complex than they need to be. And we can find some really good opportunities to synergize, or at least to the way we started this conversation, to empathize with those in the rest of the organization. Craig?
And Alex, it sounds quite puerile and comic.
Yeah.
But something that has considerable impact is if you're not having conversations around customers in your organization, and especially if your leaders aren't, take a pop-up of a customer with you to a meeting and just put it in the chair next to you. And eventually people sort of say, what's that about? Well, none of this conversation has affected this person, so why are we wasting all this time? So bring a customer to your meeting. Bring a customer to your board meeting. Again, don't be afraid to embarrass people into having the conversation.
Aslan, do you have any other thoughts? I see you at the edge of your seat.
Yeah, if they would allow you. Sometimes it's quite sensitive. I mean, every time we suggest that, they're like, oh no, we're not going to go for it.
Yeah.
And they don't even want to go for a doll or a puppet. So back to what you said, I think it's pretty important now that we have this conversation, because I don't always necessarily exchange my experience with lots of different colleagues. I'm not like a big networking type, I guess. However, one thing becomes evident, that a lot of teams in the field, whoever is basically calling us up or ask for some CX work, they do lack an understanding of what is the difference between the journeys and CX design or service design, for example, blueprints, service blueprints. what's the difference between the processes and journeys? I think one of our colleagues this morning brought up this point as well, that they need to understand the technical side of what they're requesting and what the impact is going to be, the outcome of that work. And one thing that we have to remember is when CX started in the beginning, it was a gimmicky, fluffy exercise of doing maps and telling people that, you know, you are really bad here and you could have been a bit better in that spot. But we've moved on since then. It's 2025, and we need to have a bigger, much more powerful, I guess, arsenal of skills when it comes to process mapping, when it comes to understanding organizational dynamics, when it comes to getting your hands dirty, empathy maps, you call it like mystery shopping. And the whole scope eventually brings to a transformation. When you understand the strategies that lie ahead, not for the CX team, but also for all other teams, you understand the dynamics and the politics which will follow you in all of those sessions. I had an unlucky experience of selling one very clear solution, and it took me 60-something meetings to tell people that a self-service AI might actually help them save some money. And we're not like a solution provider, we're a consultancy. So in some cases, politics play against projects and leaders. And I guess navigating the political environment is also one of the things that we have to all inhibit as a skill.
Mark, I know we have 10 minutes left, but I wish we could open that can of worms, because we could have a whole other hour worth of conversation on that front. What I do want to do, though, with our last question here, you mentioned that arsenal, that kind of toolkit. Each of us has a toolbox, so to speak, of the skills that we have for customer experience and customer-centric thinking and design integration across the workforce. I'm curious, each of you, could you share your favorite place to get tools or techniques? As we wrap up the session with CX leaders in the audience, where can they go to learn some of your favorite hits on how to do what we've been talking about?
I can go for it.
Please.
All right, so I don't move up and down, I move laterally in these situations. It's, I gave an example during one of my speeches last time. When we used to work on real cinema, we didn't go to other cinemas to check how they do things. Yeah, we went to airports to check for scheduling. We went to Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime to check for the ads, for the genre, for the marketing and personalization. And so we've basically used the best categories and their knowledge in something specific.
Yeah.
So yeah, the general request of, hey, why don't you go and benchmark this and that, it just doesn't work anymore. Like you're gonna create lookalike companies. What's the point? Yeah, what's gonna be the difference in experiences you're gonna be providing? But clients would always ask for it because they're just curious to know what's happening over there. Right. I gave that example as well. I think I used to work for BAT, and in the Kent's team, in the brand team, we kept looking at Marlboro. 4 years later, I met the Philip Morris team, and I figured out that they were looking at us at Kent. So,
surprise.
Yeah.
So analogous experiences. One thing along those lines I think is also really important to think about from a customer-centric strategy is recognizing that just like no department exists in a silo, our companies don't exist in silos either, right? Our customers have big, complex lives. They purchase from lots of other companies, including our competitors. So understanding what other experiences they might be having across a variety of different services and products, I think is a really great way to think about how we can improve our own operations. What are some other toolkits that we can learn from, borrow from?
Well, I like the idea of related worlds, because related worlds means that, you know, if I'm going to provide a chauffeur drive service for an airline, I don't want to benchmark against other airline chauffeur drive services because they probably use the same cars in New York and the same cars in London. But what I want to do is make it as easy as Uber to book. So look at related worlds to give you the ideas. The other thing is often the concept of flip it. If something's not working, flip it. Did a lot of work in high-end retail. And to sell more, you've got to stop selling. Sounds counterintuitive, but if you don't have relationship, you can't sell. Get the relationship right and you can sell. So sometimes we focus on the wrong stuff and expect a different result. So related worlds is a place I often look. And the other thing is to look at futurists who are starting to trend things. I still follow a futurist who's now in her 80s in New York called Faith Popcorn. And if you don't know her, Google her. She's an eccentric lady. But in the late 80s, she was predicting we would be cocooning. She coined the term cocooning. We would be at home, and everything will come to us. Our movies would come to us. Our food would come to us. Her latest trend is that we are going to stop eating food. We will take tablets for supplements, and we will eat out at restaurants for entertainment. So pick up on some of these trends because our customers are already living in that space. We just play catch-up in organizations.
And at the very least, we can avoid having to play catch-up to our competitors, too.
And you don't pay school fees twice.
True. There you go. What about you, Laura? What toolboxes would you recommend?
Your customers, they are your biggest toolbox. I'm always reminded of two examples. There's a Swedish neobank that doesn't look at other neobanks to see how they should design their experience. They look to Netflix, Spotify, because they understand that the industry, the platform, the ecosystem, whatever you want to call it, they understand that their sandbox, their playing field, is that. So looking at other neobanks is not necessarily going to be the best use of their time. Yes, you need competitor insight, but you don't need to only focus on them. So look elsewhere. And look at who your customers are and what they're doing. I believe it was Lamborghini. It could have been Ferrari. Many, many years ago, they didn't advertise on TV. And someone asked them, why are you not advertising on TV? All your other competitors, like everyone's advertising. And they said, our customers aren't sitting at home watching TV. Know who your customers are. Know what their values are that are driving their behaviors, going back to your point, Natalia. Once you understand your customers deeply, you will understand and you will be able to identify where you should be going to learn what you need to know. Because also, always remember, and this was mentioned just a little bit earlier, your customers are not comparing, even my customers as a consultant, they're not comparing me to the last consultant they worked with. They're comparing me to the last great experience they had, whether that's with an airline or a car or whoever. That's who I'm being compared to.
I love it. Craig.
Just one last question, or one last issue around that is, I like the question that Natalia, you asked right at the beginning, is what business are you in? I think we get so hung up that we are in the airline business or the banking business or whatever else. But when you throw that on it, when you flip it, you actually, most of us are in the hospitality business. And as soon as you change that thinking, and I think it was Schultz in Starbucks said that, he said, you know, as soon as I understood that I was in the lounge business, I learned how to sell more coffee. And he said he was in the lounge business because he had to build spaces that people could come and sit at, have meetings at, have Wi-Fi, meet their friends, rush in and get a coffee. Coffee was secondary to what he did. He said he then had to go and train his baristas on how to make better coffee. But really, really think about what business are you in, not what sector you currently perform in, but what sector are you in?
And I think so much of that goes to basically the points of all of the speakers already throughout the day. Understanding as much as we can about the people that are buying from us or that we would like to have buy from us. Understanding our customers, their needs, their nuances, their preferences, their insights. To add my own preferred tools to the box, you might be familiar with the book series, This is Service Design Thinking, and the sequel, This is Service Design Doing. In addition to two fabulous books that are really very much how-to guides, there's a complimentary website, thisisservicedesigndoing.com, which offers an enormous array of free sources, I'll call them, that you can access on everything from crafting a CX strategy to developing marketing research and customer-centric thinking. So I don't get a commission from them, but I love using their products, so I'm going to give them a plug here. The other place, as we wrap up this session in the final minute now, that I'm going to give a plug for, is this group. We are the best in the world. We wouldn't be here if we weren't. This is the Customer Centricity World Series, and so take the rest of today, tonight, and beyond to get to know people at your tables, in the hallways, across industries, and around geographic regions, because here we've got the masterminds that can really help us lift our industry, lift all industries together. Speaking of lifting industries, thank you to our great panel for sharing their perspectives and for the work that you're doing to promote customer centricity. And I'll turn it back over to our hosts as we conclude the day. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Alex.
Sure.